Welcome to this series of readings of the Mechanization concept, a manifesto by the Great Divine Director. There are 22 parts to these releases by the Great Divine Director. He has asked that they be read in the order of their release. I am Caroline Hansky, the reader. The teachings were given by the Great Divine Director through the messenger Mark L. Prophet in 1965. Permission was granted for reading them and making them available to the general public in audio form. These readings are from Mark and Elizabeth Prophet, The Mechanization Concept, The Mysteries of God on the Creation of Mechanized Man, Pearls of Wisdom, Volume 8, Teachings of the Ascended Masters, Summit University Press, copyright Church Universal and Triumphant, 1965. They are also published as Mark L. Prophet, the Soulless One, Cloning a Counterfeit Creation, copyright 1965, 1980, 1981, Summit University Press. Why would you want to listen to and or read these releases? Because the message in them is as important now, or even more so, as when it was originally delivered. The message is serious and ought to be taken seriously. The mechanical, non-human creation, not created by God ones, are among us and have been for thousands of years. We have taken on their consciousness to some degree and must free ourselves from it. Prayer and working on our psychology are two ways of doing this. But first, we must be aware of what the mechanical consciousness is. These releases by the Great Divine Director are for this purpose. What makes this so relevant at this time? If you are following the news of the development of robots for every conceivable purpose, then is it not curious that this is made to seem a new development? As these current robots are portrayed, they are obviously mechanical. Yet, just as obvious from the Great Divine Director teachings is the fact that the robots that have been on the earth for thousands of years appear like humans. We don't know the difference. Then why is it important to make us think this is a new advanced development? Something to ponder. The Great Divine Director is a cosmic being with many offices in the spiritual hierarchy. For example, he is a member of the karmic board in which he represents the first ray of God power. He is known as the Great Divine Director because he has merged his consciousness with the cosmic cycles of God's divine plan for untold universes of light. Great Divine Director is a title of an office in the cosmic hierarchy, given to the one who, by virtue of diligent application over the eons, focuses within his causal body the formula of the ascension for the children of God and the sons and daughters of the Most High evolving in this cosmos. The causal body is the spiritual part of us in which is stored our attainment, all merit we have ever accrued, our treasures stored in heaven. The Great Divine Director's causal body is a giant blue sphere that surrounds the entire planet. Thus, his attainment of cosmic consciousness qualifies him to ensoul the flame of divine direction on behalf of Earth's evolutions and untold lifeways beyond. The Great Divine Director long ago passed those initiations that placed him at cosmic levels of service and qualified him to become the Manu of the seventh root race. A Manu embodies the archetype for an entire life wave of souls who will incarnate on Earth at a certain period, including the divine image and likeness out of which they are made and the pattern of their destiny. The seventh root race is destined to embody first in South America under the Great Divine Director, and so he presides spiritually over the continent of South America. He is then the lawgiver and sponsor of the seventh root race, the one who holds the blueprint for the entire race of the souls who begin their embodiment in the age of Aquarius that is now dawning. Godfrey Ray King, author of the book, The Magic Presence, describes the Great Divine Director in it. This majestic being stood fully 6 feet 4 inches in height, with wavy hair that fell to his shoulders and looked like sunshine on gold. His robes glittered with points of light like jewels that flashed continually with the tremendous radiance of the power held under his control and obedient to his conscious direction. The girdle encircling his waist was a mass of sapphires and diamonds. From it hung a panel to a few inches below the knees. This also was a mass of jewels. End of quote. The great divine director has said, I pray that you will call to me, for I have within my consciousness the scroll of the divine plan for every living soul on Terra and in the vast beyond. The Mechanization Concept, a manifesto by the Great Divine Director, Part W, will. To blessed ones whose mind is truly the mind of God, let God think through you the thoughts of his immortal freedom, and thereby replace the ravages of a rote will driven by mechanized human habit with responsible ritual, whereby the life abundant within you will beget life abundantly. Men have often noticed that in periodic cycles they are inspired, and then again they seem to drift as with a strong current, suffering the ravages of inertia and a lack of will. Let us seek the reason for the problem and its solution. So frequently individuals seek to find one villain in the piece, one cause for each effect, whereas a multitude of miniature causes, or one or two or more major causes, may lie at the root of the trouble. The mechanical sense has been employed by mankind in part ever since the fall of man from his high estate. Man's need to substitute his lesser human powers for his lost divine ones has caused him to seek to master methods of both mind and mechanics in directing and controlling matter and even thought. In establishing limitations upon the power of thought, some men have considered the human mind to have certain frailties which it does not in reality have. Considering the human mind to be a recording device similar to a tape recorder or a phonograph record, it would naturally seem to have spatial limitations governed by the size of the disc or the length of the reel. Seeing that in reality the mind of man is the mind of God, it is unlimited, and therefore this is a myth that has hampered mankind's power of thought. We acknowledge that the cerebral cortex and the great switching chunks of the nervous system connected with the brain and spinal column appear to have limitations, but precious ones, if you will pause to think, you will realize that man cannot truly say more than one word at a time, whereas he can think several words or sentences of complex ideas in the time that it takes to utter one. Some musicians have told of how the entire format for a symphony was born in their minds in one instant. Therefore, man's sense of limitation and recognition thereof is one of the hindrances which inhibits his full life expression. This false sense bobs to the surface of consciousness like a cork to signal his defeat as he reels in the fish story or lie of the carnal mind with its attendant limitations. Another deleterious aspect of this sense of limitation is a sense of boredom in connection with the intense and repetitious cycles of life. Blessed ones, here is a sinister delusion. Your alphabet has 26 letters in the English language, yet every word is constructed from one or more of these characters in specific arrangement according to a preconceived standard of spelling and pronunciation. The most sublime and the most ridiculous prose and poetry are written employing these words. The physical demands of life are often most repetitious and conform to the law of man's physical being, governing the assimilation and disbursement of energy. Good food, water, air, and internal heat combine to maintain the intelligent biological functions of the physical form. Often men make much ado about nothing, for it has been clearly said that flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God. Yet more attention is lavished upon this portion of man than upon any other, and the care and control of the physical form has become the paramount business of the mass mind. We do not discourage necessary care, but we put all things in perspective in order that the soul might not be neglected and the divine purposes of life be served. The will to do is sometimes trapped in the valve of man's incorrect understanding and lack of perspective concerning life and life's purposes. Thus mankind experiences cycles of vacillation. At times they feel that life is buoyant, full of joy and hope, springing eternal. Then again life seems to be ebbing away with the approach of old age. At various times throughout their existence, mankind do feel an intense inner longing to fulfill their spiritual raison d'etre. Sometimes they know not how to respond to the yearnings of the spirit, and so they fulfill the lusts of the flesh, a very poor substitute indeed. Some reject the world completely and seek in a life of austerity to know God. Others still are searching for the middle way, and by God's grace they shall find it. We could go on for a long time and cover many angles of this subject, but I think that each life stream has his own story to tell, and it is perhaps needless that I draw an excess of parallel examples. There is one more major factor I would touch upon, and that is the sense of karmic burden, wherein the individual, recognizing in himself undesirable traits carried over from past embodiments and externalizations, feels hopeless to change rapidly enough to win his victory here and now. He therefore postpones indefinitely any attempt at self-correction. On the face of it, from the human level, this argument seems to have some form of pragmatic value, but in an honest relationship to the divine plan, it is the weakest of all excuses. There are a number of minor factors that hinder the expression of the divine will. Among these are, of course, the mass effluvia of mortal consciousness, the projection of hate and hate creations against an individual who is embarking upon a spiritual career by those who cannot or will not understand his way of life, and even simple laziness, whereby individuals rebelling against the necessity of effort, whether to move the muscles of the body or to stretch the facets of the mind by cogitation, meditation, or contemplation, prefer the old accustomed habits of fatigue and ennui. Not a pretty picture is all of this human sinkhole where self-pity holds sway, and lifetime after lifetime pass with precious little progress. Contributing to this delay and demi-existence is the woeful sense of frustration, as the soul, with all of its impelling aspirations, like a caged bird, seeks to break the barriers that surround it. Now let us seek for a permanent solution to this complex problem. Again, as in the case of the causes, so the solution does not necessarily lie in one specific direction, but in a number of major and minor activities which together can shatter the old matrices of wrong thought and feeling and gradually tip the scales of justice into balance. I have always believed that fire, as you say, can be fought with fire. The very mechanics of system can thus be rightly employed together with bulldog determination that man might effect the beginning of his release from lethargy and inertia. But as man comes into conflict with the deep-rooted tendencies that are within his world, it will require more than human will to permanently pull him up by his own bootstraps. Hence we must turn to divine automation, by which the motive of divine love is implanted in all creation. For true it is indeed that divine love expands and ever expands itself, duplicates and reduplicates the wonderful motifs and patterns of happiness which are God's nature wheresoever his flame touches. Beloved Jesus' statements in which he pointed to the fowls of the air and the lilies of the field. Wherefore, if God so clothe the grass of the field, which today is and tomorrow is cast into the oven, shall he not much more clothe you, O ye of little faith? Therefore take no thought, saying, What shall we eat? Or, what shall we drink? Or, wherewithal shall we be clothed? But seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. Indicate that it is not vital that man should have his attention constantly turned without to the physical. The words take no thought are very strong. Indeed, they make very clear where man's first concerns must be, and they show that those who give their will to God are rewarded with his abundant grace. We admonish, then, the committing of both biological functions and physical things under the keeping of the divine presence, a relinquishing, a letting go of mankind's seeming great need constantly to struggle with outer conditions. Then, when the sense of takeover is complete, when the divine intelligence of God is invoked by man, so that the Father in action is caring for the human, as the elementals care for the lilies of the field, man will not only be vested with divine abundance, but with a feeling of supreme happiness in that abundance. By taking undue thought or being concerned with the cares of this world, mankind create and sustain a sense of limitation for themselves, and then, within this limited framework, they seek to exert unlimited control over the many facets of the world. When mankind turn to God and in sweet surrender invoke the presence of God and His mighty light rays to direct and perfect all outer conditions, there is no longer a sense of limitation, for here unlimited grace corrects the control and controls the substance over which He then has dominion. The mind of man is thus freed from the cage of the body sense, and the bird of happiness flies from the cage at will, returning joyously to perch therein and sing his song of divine freedom. By excursions out from the consciousness into the mind of the ascended Master, into the mind of Christ, and back into the heart of God, sustained strength is thus drawn forth and flows into the world of the Chela. Now divine law is acting, and this is unlimited. Not now the very vibratory action of God is impregnating the human aura. When, through the penetration of the soul consciousness of man into the heart of the ascended masters and to their higher ranges of thought and feeling, man lowers this feeling into his world. There is a spiritual companionship and rapport established, whereby he becomes more in tune with the God in all nature and in his fellow men. Even their lack of awareness of that attunement does not hinder some internal recognition, which signifies to them that hope and peace are at hand. The vain struggles of the world are very intense, and the suffering of the world is gross. It is small comfort to those embroiled in turmoil to be told that they suffer from the results of their own karma. It is true that in inner levels this idea must be gently conveyed and an altered perspective given, so that they may have a reinforced desire to find their freedom in their next embodiment. But when we deal with you, blessed ones, who read our words today, we are speaking to those now in embodiment whose hopes yet flourish, centered about their own precious memory of current events. You have some externalized momentum, then, in dealing with divine perfection. To you is given a sense of hope and possibility. I say to you now that certain right action will give you great assistance today. The efficacy of prayer has already been proven, but there are wrong prayers, just as there are right prayers. Selfishness and self-pity have no place in right prayer. Each demand made upon life, then, should be in order to better serve the purposes of God. Each benefit of freedom which you seek should enable you to more effectively serve His holy cause. The process of thinking your way clear can also be employed, and this is doubly effective if you can make yourself to know that it is God thinking through you the thoughts of His immortal freedom. As you think yourself free from human entanglements, you will find new vistas opening before you. Leonardo da Vinci and many of the great painters of the world in their reveries did contact the higher etheric realms and angelic levels. They drew forth from their inspirations and meditations benefits preserved by mankind to the present hour. The will can be altered from the human to become divine, and indolence can be thrashed, but it is best dispensed with by a firm but gradual leading. You know, precious ones, when you have a sense of being driven, the human is apt to rebel. People often rise up in wrath and indignation at even a hint of tyranny. Whether or not this is right, I wish to point out that mankind have a great momentum of resistance against being told what to do. Unquestionably, this trait causes untold misery to people who would otherwise have the benefit of wise experience, but unfortunately they must suffer bad experiences themselves in order to learn. We give forth this instruction because we know that the power of wrong habit has been mechanically established. Over and over again, mankind have made the same mistakes. Yet many of the successful men and women of today and past ages have made significant accomplishments by the power of right habit. We therefore extol the establishment of responsible ritual, and wish to point out that there is no real parallel between divine grace, established in ritual and the mechanistic concepts of society that seek to control all life upon the planet. Now it almost goes without saying that in this discourse on right will and wrong will, on truth and error, we again wish to insert our warning that the smoke screening which mankind raise again and again to conceal their wrong intents is practiced by the few, whereas the many become victims. Almost everyone upon the planet at one time or another has suffered as the result of the depredations of those wicked ones who plot and hatch their plots against every constructive endeavor. Remember, precious ones, that few unascended individuals are perfect. I realize some of you may take issue with me on this and say that none are perfect. I happen to know, however, that just prior to the ascension, some unascended ones are finally perfected. But inasmuch as the masses are not, do not expect too much from anyone, but give everyone the benefit of the doubt, all the while remaining alert, so that you be neither self-deceived nor deceived by others. On guard for victory I am, the great Divine Director.